A single bark cut through the crowd of hundreds of passengers. A sudden bite, even in the highest level of airport security. And a suitcase that no one was allowed to touch. What seemed like a minor airport incident turned out to be the first domino to fall, unleashing a horrifying chain of truths that had long been hidden behind layers of military precision, airtight security, and reputations beyond reproach. There was no first gunshot, no intense foot chase. But it was more than enough to throw the entire airport into chaos, forcing the Special Response Unit to intervene immediately. Watch until the end to find out why a canine dog bit a pilot in the middle of an international terminal, and why no one, not even security, dared to open that suitcase. Just as the passengers were lining up to board the plane, a sharp bark shattered the calm. Bolt, a K9 officer assigned to the airport Special Response Unit, suddenly broke formation. He bolted past the security barrier and in a flash clamped his jaws tightly around the left arm of a man in a pilot's uniform. Screams erupted in every direction. Passengers stumbled backward and a panic luggage hit the floor and burst open. Children started crying. Adults shouted for airport staff. Security guards blew their whistles. Red lights flashed throughout the departure area. And amid all the chaos, the man stood his ground. With his right hand, he held tight to a sleek brown leather suitcase, like whatever was inside mattered more than the flesh being torn from his arm by trained canine teeth. The man who had just been bitten was none other than Mason Kirk, the chief pilot of Pacific Global, the largest airline in the United States. Official records described Mason as the model of professionalism and experience. 49 years old, 20 years of service in the Air Force, an honorary lieutenant colonel, over 9,000 flight hours as lead pilot, and a survivor of 3 in-flight accidents where every other crew member had died. Pinned on his chest was a silver medal for bravery, awarded after a rescue mission on the Syrian border. A silent hero. A man who had written textbooks on aviation, taught at the Air Force Academy, and never once received a complaint in his entire career. Today, he was not on a rescue mission. Today, he was scheduled to captain a commercial flight FT-1990, an international route from Denver to Frankfurt. A routine assignment, clear skies, passengers seated, boarding complete. Everything should have gone smoothly. But it was Mason, not a single passenger, who triggered an all-out attack from a K9 dog with over 500 hours of combat and detection training. Bolt the K9 was not barking randomly or reacting out of instinct. He was not agitated. He was not panicked. He charged directly and bit down with precision as if he had locked onto his target long before it happened. By the time the rapid response team subdued Bolt and medics approached Mason, the pilot raised his hand to stop them. His voice was calm and low, steady as ever. "Just a bite. I am fine." Everyone around was stunned by his unnerving composure. Blood continued to seep from beneath his white sleeve, forming a trail down his arm. An airport staff member stepped forward to help, reaching out instinctively to take the glossy brown suitcase from Mason's hand. It was a harmless gesture, but Mason immediately stepped back, gripped the handle tighter, and locked eyes with the man, his expression hard as steel. "Do not touch it. No one is allowed to open this." Just one sentence, but it froze the entire security team in place. The atmosphere suddenly turned ice cold. No one knew what was inside that suitcase, but the way Mason reacted, it felt like this was not just about personal belongings. It was something dangerous, something worth hiding. As Mason Kirk was escorted to the medical quarantine area, Bolt refused to move. The 3-meter leash, stiff as a steel cable, stretched taut with every growl that pulsed from the dog's chest. He did not howl. He did not whimper. He just growled steadily, fiercely, like an engine fueled by fury that refused to shut down. "Take him back to the kennel," a commanding officer ordered. But even after being dragged back more than 30 feet, Bolt's eyes stayed locked on the brown leather suitcase Mason had brought with him. He showed no interest in people. He did not react to the crowd. He ignored the scent of blood seeping from Mason's arm. He only looked at the suitcase, growled at the suitcase. That was the moment people began to realize something was very wrong. The suitcase had passed through security scans without setting off a single alert. No explosives, no strange metals, no unauthorized electronics. And yet, the dog's eyes told a different story. Logan, a canine handler who had trained Bolt since he was 6 months old, was called to the scene. He gave the command to sit, followed by the signal to stand down. But Bolt did not comply. The command was repeated 3 times. Bolt remained standing, still growling, still staring at the suitcase like he was confronting a threat that had taken the life of a fellow soldier. "I have never seen him like this," Logan muttered. "Never." Security personnel began to circle the area. A sense of unease spread quickly. It was just a suitcase, not heavy, not unusual, not making a sound, but somehow it triggered a combat-trained K9 into complete defiance. One officer stepped forward to inspect it manually. The moment he approached, Bolt let out a bark sharp and fast, like a whip cracking through the air that startled the entire room. The officer froze on the spot. With that single bark, the tension in the room became unbearable. No one moved another step. Everything froze in place. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood whatever was inside that suitcase must not be opened. Less than 30 minutes after the incident, footage recorded by a bystander's phone had already gone viral. A K9 lunging at a pilot, a man gripping a suitcase like it held his life, an entire security team standing still, unwilling to unlock it. Hashtags like Flight 1999 K9V's pilot and the brown case quickly soared to the top of global search trends within hours. News outlets scrambled to cover the event, each with their own version. Some called Bolt a rogue dog. Others claimed Mason had tried to bring a biological explosive onto the plane. A few experts even floated the theory that he was transporting human remains. At the Denver airport's emergency security briefing, even the most level-headed officials could no longer treat this as a technical error. They reviewed footage of Bolt from multiple camera angles. Every time someone reached for the suitcase, Bolt growled louder. But when Mason held it, Bolt backed off, cautious. He did not attack. He did not bark. But he never looked away. And Mason, his wound bandaged, sat quietly in the security room, his sunken eyes fixed on the floor, one hand still gripping the suitcase handle. A senior officer asked him one final time, "We have the authority to open it. Refusal will place you on the high threat list." Mason said nothing. He only looked at the officer with tired eyes, eyes that held pain. "Do you believe a service dog can smell fear?" he asked quietly. "Then ask that dog who it fears more, me or what is inside this case." The silver-brown leather suitcase sat silently on the floor of the airport quarantine room, its latch sealed tight. Mason Kirk faced 3 high-level security agents under harsh ceiling lights, a scene straight out of a CIA interrogation. He said nothing, just stared at the floor, one hand resting firmly on the suitcase handle. Outside, the world exploded. Bolt, the K9 that attacked a pilot at the boarding gate, had become a national hero on Twitter. The narrative of Mason Kirk, the so-called legendary pilot, being taken down by a military-trained dog was almost too bizarre to believe. Top-level airport security immediately requested Mason Kirk's military records. The defense database responded with a black screen and a single classified line: Operation Bishop 4, status terminated personnel, M. Kirk clearance level, ECLS, encrypted clearance level. Secret ECLS is a NATO-grade encryption level used only for top-tier black operations. Access requires clearance codes directly from the Pentagon. Once the access request was denied, an independent documentary crew began tracking down the other personnel listed under Bishop 4. Sergeant Harold Green, an electronics technician, was ruled a suicide with 2 bullets to the chest. Lieutenant Darnell, a logistics helicopter pilot, disappeared during vacation, his body never found. Dr. Elena Farrow, a tactical psychologist, was urgently transferred to an isolated Arctic research base. Lieutenant Reyes, a tactical advisor, was declared brain dead after an accident. Out of the 6 personnel listed under Bishop 4, only Mason Kirk was still alive, and he now sat in front of an interrogation clock, gripping a suitcase no one was allowed to touch. The media buzzed. Military networks dug up a short clip from 2015 Mason being honored in a ceremony for rescuing hostages in Syria. The footage lasted just 43 seconds. After that, he vanished from all military operations. No interviews, no public records, no social media, no appearances, nothing. An investigative journalist said during a podcast, Mason was not hidden. He was erased. Then a chilling audio recording leaked onto underground forums. A breathless voice struggling over the rumble of debris. Do not bring it back. That thing is still alive. Voice experts ran a vocal frequency analysis. The match was 91% identical to Mason Kirk's speech during the 2015 ceremony. The media hit a dead end. The military went silent. Homeland Security denied responsibility. Only one living creature continued to growl in the surveillance room, eyes fixed on the suitcase. Bolt, the dog who had smelled what no one dared to name. And Mason, his eyes still locked on the floor, murmured again, "You better not open it." Not unless you want that thing to come back. The silver-brown suitcase was placed inside a Level 3 biohazard containment chamber, normally reserved for objects that carry unidentified pathogens or potential biotraces. No one saw it as regular luggage anymore, and Bolt the service dog with a spotless record lay growling in front of the glass window eyes, never straying from what was inside. The Aviation Security Task Force, along with biochemists and a military veterinarian, were called in for an emergency overnight briefing. Everyone knew this was no longer just an airport incident. This was a crisis without precedent where a K-9 attacked a decorated pilot over an unmarked suitcase. A young officer approached with an electronic unlocking tool. The moment the laser scanned the latch, Bolt leapt up, snarling and letting out a series of long, solitary howls, as if signaling that something truly dangerous was trapped inside. Lieutenant Camilla Boyd, who had worked with Bolt since the Somalia operation in 2016, immediately called it off. "That is not a warning," she said. "That is panic." A mobile lab was set up beside the containment unit. Rather than opening the suitcase, they used an air sampling needle to extract a microsample from the suitcase's ventilation seam. 4 milliliters of compressed air were drawn and sealed for analysis. Inside the chamber, Bolt continued pacing in circles, nose to the floor, ears standing tall, letting out faint whimpers as if he sensed something fundamentally wrong, something invisible to human eyes. 18 minutes later, the preliminary results printed out. The first line shocked the entire team. Human hemoglobin detected. Chlorinated chemical. CHX form. High concentration. Denatured amino acids. Residual traces of soft tissue cells. The vet double-checked the instrument, thinking the sample might have been contaminated. But a second sample taken from a different air vent on the suitcase yielded identical results. Camilla went pale. This was not just human blood residue. This was biological vapor emitted either from living tissue or from a decomposing life form held under controlled decay. More disturbing still, Bolt's scent recognition system flagged an anomaly. The chemical odor from the suitcase triggered a neurological pattern in Bolt that matched an alert from 3 years ago in a classified recovery mission that had since been sealed by the military. Camilla opened her laptop, accessed the K9 behavior archive, and entered her secure credentials. Her eyes widened. The last time Bolt had a similar reaction was at a military airbase placed under lockdown for allegedly housing a foreign biological entity linked to the disappearance of an aircraft. But all records from that event were confiscated, encrypted, and sealed with a red warning, "Do not reopen. Biohazard Level 5." Camilla tightened her grip on the report, unable to speak. "Bolt is not reacting to Mason," she finally told the team. "He is reacting to what's inside the suitcase, and that is not an object." The room fell silent. The suitcase sat motionless in the isolation chamber. But within that stillness was a scent familiar to some of them, one they had been trained to recognize and warned to forget. A high-level biological analysis unit was immediately assembled inside the quarantine zone. To the task force, the suitcase was no longer ordinary luggage. It was now designated a Level 4 Biological Entity Transport Unit under Homeland Security classification. To assess it properly, an air sample from inside the suitcase was sent to the U.S. Army Biomedical Center in Hawaii, the facility responsible for decoding unidentified biological traces. Within 6 hours, the encrypted confidential report returned. Airborne bioanalysis revealed abnormally high concentrations of separated hemoglobin, consistent with rapid human blood decomposition. Industrial-grade chlorine did not originate from the external environment, but was internally released from the biological entity itself for preservation purposes. Amino acids presented molecular structures never before recorded in any known human tissue. Most notably, denatured soft tissue cells that reacted unusually to ultraviolet light. Then came a sentence that froze the entire research team: 97.8% genetic match with the biological sample from the Omega Delta event in Alaska in 2018. All eyes turned to the code board. Camilla went pale. Omega Delta was not a name you encountered in criminal investigations. It was a designation reserved for events that suggested a violation of the biological boundary between humans and something else. She whispered, "It's the same thing. The one that made us shut down the northern base." In 2018, a wave of disappearances struck a military medical station near the Arctic Circle. 12 soldiers and 3 scientists vanished overnight. All that remained was a cryo-storage unit containing 3 bags of internal organs, none of which matched any DNA in official databases, yet bore biological structures eerily close to human. The government labeled it a bioradiological accident, and the entire case was sealed. Now, the biological sample inside Mason Kirk's suitcase, the same Mason who had been part of the recovery mission back then, showed a near-perfect match. Camilla held back a sharp breath. Now it made sense why Bolt reacted with such fury. K9 dogs do not remember with logic, they remember with instinct. The scent in the suitcase was the same one that had once caused Bolt to collapse at the Alaska base, right after sniffing through a frozen steel door. But what terrified her even more was this: the chlorine preservation levels indicated the entity had been placed in the suitcase less than 48 hours ago, meaning it had been alive or was still alive somewhere very close. A lab technician finally spoke up. "This blood sample, it's not from one person. It has blending markers similar to post-transplant blood, but these are not human organs. It's composite tissue, unrecognized by any classification system." Camilla stepped back. Every sign pointed to one thing: this was a cultivated biological organism, but not one grown in a lab. It had been grown inside another human body. Outside, Bolt began barking again. Not erratically like before, but in rhythmic, deliberate bursts. It was a coded alert. The same alert recorded during only 2 missions in Bolt's entire career, both involving the presence of biostructures incompatible with normal life. Camilla knelt beside Bolt, gently stroking his head. His eyes never left the suitcase. His ears stayed pricked. His body tense, ready to launch at a moment's notice. She whispered, "Mason, what are you transporting?" Inside the chamber, the suitcase remained, still, silent, lifeless. But the smell inside was changing. A biological sensor suddenly triggered slight increase in radiation temperature, which meant something inside was beginning to move. As soon as the internal temperature rose slightly, the biohazard alert system flashed red. Bolt let out 3 short howls, the precise signal for biological threat in motion. At the same time, inside the airport's security command room, a surveillance analyst noticed something strange. Wait, this person, he was here before. He scrubbed through archived footage from 3 days ago. The screen flickered, low-resolution hazy, but in one monochrome frame it was unmistakably Mason Kirk, still wearing his pilot uniform, standing in front of a corroded metal door. Not a boarding gate, a sealed emergency maintenance door, closed off and marked since 2018. Faint rusted letters were still visible: access point, obsolete wave navigation sector, authorized personnel only. The security officer immediately alerted the station commander. Video analysis revealed something chilling. Mason had not been there once but twice, both around 2 o'clock in the morning during off hours when restricted zones undergo routine safety checks. The question was clear. How did a civilian pilot access an area permanently sealed 5 years ago? A rapid response team was dispatched. 4 members, 2 airport police officers, 1 senior security technician, and Lieutenant Camilla Boyd, who had been monitoring Bolt's reactions, were assigned to approach the sealed door. No one had been allowed to open it in over 5 years. And just as shown in the footage, the door's hinges bore clear signs of welding, but some of the seams had recently been filed down. Camilla signaled for a flashlight. They shined it along the door's edge. There was a gap. Small, just a sliver, but wide enough for a slender person to slip through. One officer whispered, "This cannot be. If he went through here, then..." The team stood in silence before the rusted steel. No one dared open it. No one knew what lay beyond. But they all felt the same thing deep in their gut. This place was never truly abandoned. The hinges let out an eerie screech as the heavy door slowly creaked open. A wave of cold air rushed out, carrying the stale scent of mold and diluted chlorine air that belonged to a place sealed off for far too long, yet somehow never truly at rest. Camilla raised her flashlight. The beam trembled as it cut through thick dust and long, drooping cobwebs that hung like curtains. Beyond the door was not a maintenance storage room as the records claimed, but a deep corridor with corrugated steel flooring. The walls bore faint drag marks, like something had once been hauled through here. A secondary passage. Signal navigation system. The technician muttered, staring at a decaying schematic hastily pinned to the wall, warped by years of moisture. The team stepped in. Wherever the flashlights landed, clouds of dust swirled like smoke. There were fresh footprints, but only one kind. Camilla crouched to examine them. Pilot boots. Mason's boots. He had definitely returned to this place. The hallway extended roughly 260 feet, ending at a room with double steel doors, military-grade electromagnetic shielding. Outside, an old faded label still clung to the metal auxiliary broadcast room. Independent channel. Airport documentation claimed the system had been decommissioned at the end of 2018. No one ever reported this room being kept active. "It is not on the current facility blueprint," Camilla murmured, beads of sweat on her forehead. The technician knocked gently on the door. A deep, hollow echo came back. But behind it, there was a sound. A faint click, 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 steady as a countdown. "There is power inside," he said quietly, turning to Camilla. She nodded. Together they inserted the key and turned the handle. The door swung open, and silence was instantly consumed by the hum of electromagnetic pulses coming from a device that had no business being there. It was still running right in the middle of a dust-covered room. A radio signal was being broadcast as if someone had never left. "This is a single-channel frequency." "Single channel," the technician exclaimed. "Every 30 minutes. Matches the standard broadcast cycle used for large military jet aircraft." "But no one uses this frequency anymore," Camilla's voice sharpened. "Why is a retired transmitter still sending signals under a commercial airport?" The technician quickly tapped into the waveform analyzer. The graph on the display was clean, consistent with no distortion. It was not just a military signal, it was the exact encryption once used in NATO's emergency positioning systems during the Gulf War. A signal decoder was connected to the data port. The screen lit up with a warning: "Match found. QX721. Last ping detected 729 days ago. The room froze." QX721, the flight that vanished without a trace, dubbed the most perfect disappearance in 21st century aviation. No survivors, no black box, no distress call, no explanation. The technician's hands trembled as he removed the panel. Inside, it was not civilian-grade hardware. It was a military navigation core. The data port still bore the original security seal from the United States Navy. This is the original transmitter. It was once installed on QX721, a forensics expert confirmed after a brief materials scan. The microchip type could not be replicated. Each one was unique. This was not just a signal match. The hardware itself was real. Camilla stepped back. Dozens of questions raced through her mind. The most important one: who brought this device back here? And why Mason Kirk? The air turned colder as the device began broadcasting a second signal. This time, the sound was a 3-pulse audio code followed by a distorted voice, warped through digital filters. Echo, alive, gate not closed. Echo, alive, gate not closed. Someone is still alive. One officer gasped. What does "gate not closed" mean? Camilla sank to the floor, eyes hollow. The device was not just transmitting, it was receiving, which meant it was in contact with something, or someone, out there. They continued dismantling the hardware, uncovering a memory chip. A file name appeared on the station screen: Gate Chu Echo 721. Final hundreds of encrypted fragments began auto-deleting as they accessed the chip. But one final line blinked onto the screen just before full erasure active: Time Link, Echo Point. The command center issued an emergency order seal off the entire site and transferred the equipment to the ultra-secure investigation facility in Washington. At the same time, the FBI was officially brought in. Camilla turned to look at Bolt the K9, who had started it all. He was still staring at the device as if it was alive. And in his eyes, and the eyes of every agent in the room, there was only one truth: Mason Kirk was no longer just a pilot. He was the link in a national secret. The next morning, the FBI field office in Washington, D.C. received an urgent wire from Los Angeles International Airport signal matching QX721 detected in old frequency chamber. Pilot Mason Kirk connected. Within 2 hours, a Level S task unit responsible for national security and aviation-related incidents was dispatched. Leading the team was Agent Meredith Shaw, a veteran known for handling the 2016 military data breach in Nevada. Upon arrival, Meredith requested full access to Mason Kirk's medical, military, civilian, and classified records. However, Most of the files were flagged ECLS, a clearance reserved for NATO intelligence operations. "He used to be a civilian pilot," Meredith asked. An officer nodded, and a war hero rescued hostages from a conflict zone in Iran back in 2013. And then resigned out of nowhere. Yes, no official reason. After the Gate Mirror mission in Cyprus, he was moved to rear-line duty. Meredith frowned. She had heard of that mission, a failed operation resulting in the mysterious loss of 3 unmanned fighters. All records sealed. While the FBI expanded their investigation, Mason was moved to the Internal Security Center. He did not resist. His expression was eerily calm. When questioned about the transmitter, he simply said, "I do not know how it got there." But when Bolt reappeared and howled 3 short bursts, the K9 signal for urgent biological detection, Meredith ordered Mason to be quarantined immediately. A quick medical scan revealed a faint stain on Mason's sleeve. Chemical analysis confirmed traces of chlorine and human hemoglobin. One specialist concluded he may have been exposed to a contaminated biological specimen. Mason's expression never changed. "I was trying to keep the passengers safe," he said. "If I had not held that suitcase, things would have gone far worse." Meredith narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean I am not allowed to say?" "By whom I signed an agreement. Project Black Veil." The room went silent. Black Veil, a long-rumored top-secret program, linked to military experiments using high-frequency signals to manipulate the human nervous system. A program supposedly shut down due to the extreme risks and ethical violations. Meredith turned to her aide. "I want a full list of all pilots who served with Mason in Gate Mirror. Find out who is still alive." At that very moment, an alert blared from the analysis center. The old broadcast device, still active, had just begun sending a two-way signal. Not just transmitting, it was now receiving replies. A new message appeared, echo acknowledged. Chaksh, next window, T plus 72 hours. "You are waiting for something to come back?" Meredith asked, her voice cold as steel. Mason looked her in the eye. "Not me, all of us. And if you are not ready, it will not ask for permission." Meredith gave the order. Place him on MDS status, maximum detention surveillance, full national tracking. Meanwhile, at a remote satellite outpost in the Pacific, an old signal relay long thought broken suddenly lit up. The frequency matched QX721, but this time, the signal was coming from outside Earth's atmosphere. This was no longer a criminal investigation. It had become a global security threat. The signal from beyond Earth's atmosphere triggered an immediate Level 2 alert across the command center. In the thick air of rising suspicion, all eyes turned to the one object that remained utterly silent, the brown suitcase Mason had protected until the very end. But everything changed when blood left on Mason's uniform after the K9 attack was collected and scanned for biometric data. And then came the unthinkable. The suitcase responded. A soft click echoed from within. Its surface split open in two, releasing a breath of icy air, like something exhaling after being sealed for far too long. Inside, there were no drugs, no documents, no explosives. There was a single object, a rectangular data recorder, coated in matte black titanium alloy, the exact build of military-grade flight data boxes. No markings, no serial number, no identifying label of any kind. Forensics experts immediately began cross-referencing models. This isn't from any civilian aircraft ever registered with the Federal Aviation Administration, a systems engineer confirmed. Its internal structure suggests a Generation 5 recording unit only used in classified missions or ghost squadrons. Meredith arrived on site in person. She ordered the casing removed and initiated a tri-layer frequency scan, a method used in national-level crash investigations. "What do we need to open it?" she asked. "It can only be activated with a specific enzyme sequence encoded to a matching blood signature," a technician replied. "We tried Mason's blood sample. It responded." A soft whir sounded from the data box's core. The light-emitting diode display blinked on with a simple message. Audio log, Echo Alpha 721. Classified access only. No one spoke. Everyone held their breath, because they all knew this would be the first real clue as to what happened aboard Flight QX721 and why Mason Kirk had returned with the box, in a way no one could explain. "Play it," Meredith ordered. The technician nodded, fingers moving swiftly across the control panel. At first, static filled the air. Then slowly the signal stabilized. A voice broke through the silence, thin, trembling, barely audible. "Help me, please. It's cold. So cold." The room froze. Every gaze turned toward the speaker. The voice continued. "They locked us below, in the cold bay. I can't move. Please, someone help my mom. She's not answering anymore. Pomogite. My v temnote. Пожалуйста." The same voice, a child's voice, but in 3 languages, English, Russian, and Vietnamese. No breaks, no dubbing, a seamless stream, and what sent chills down every spine was the tone. It did not sound like a child speaking. It sounded like a child dying. Then another line back in English. "We are locked in the cold bay. I can't feel my legs. Is Mommy still breathing?" One of the younger technicians stepped back in horror. The voice continued soft and broken. "My name is Eva. I'm 7. If anyone hears this, please don't let us disappear like them." Camilla nearly collapsed. Eva was one of the children declared dead in the QX721 incident. Her body was never recovered, but blood traces had been confirmed on an aircraft seat fragment. "Stop it," one agent shouted. "This could be fake." No, Meredith waved him off. "Check the metadata." The data loaded. Recording timestamp 21 days ago. The room fell silent. A senior officer spoke each word like lead. If Eva was confirmed dead 2 years ago, then this cannot be fake, Camilla whispered. Or, Meredith finished whatever sent this message, still has her, and the other children. A new segment of audio appeared, not just one voice, but overlapping background transmissions. They took us one by one. They called Mom an unsuitable subject. Someone is banging on the door. There's groaning in the hallway. The investigation room lost all composure. One person ran to the hallway and vomited. Another dropped to their knees, clutching their head and sobbing. Every fragment of the QX721 case was coming back this time, not as an accident, but as a carefully orchestrated biological experiment. Eva's voice returned, weak, fading. "The men in white, they don't blink. They said we're part of a trial." But Mommy cried too loud. Then they stopped her. Meredith clenched her fists. "A trial using children?" a choked voice asked from across the room. The signal grew weaker until only one final plea remained, like the last echo down an empty hallway. "Please tell them we're still here. Please." The signal ended. The display went dark. No one moved. No one spoke, because they all knew this was not just a recording. It was a cry for help through time from a place that should have been lifeless. And the most terrifying part was they were still alive. After the recording ended, the control room remained in a state of stunned paralysis. Some stepped outside, gasping for air in the hallway. Others stayed frozen in their seats, eyes still fixed on the dark screen that had just played a child's desperate call. Meredith was the first to break the silence. Run the voice ID. Check biometric signature against Global Missing Persons database. The Department of Defense's AI system began its scan. Command lines raced across the monitor. A technician barely breathing spoke up, extracting voice frequency profile, matching against international child records, cross-referenced with FBI and Interpol missing persons data. Each vocal element was analyzed: tremors, vowel formations, pressure per syllable. The software didn't just identify the person, it estimated age, emotional stress, and physiological condition at the time of speech. A sharp ding cut through the silence. The results appeared: Match ID Eva Rodriguez, born 2016, U.S. citizen, reported missing on Flight QX721, March 14, 2023. Voice status: no signs of acoustic degradation. Age consistent tone. Recording estimated to be recent, no more than 3 weeks old. Meredith blinked. So that means that voice wasn't recorded 2 years ago, like we thought. It was recent, 3 weeks ago. Everything collapsed. The room exploded into frantic whispers, stomping footsteps, phones ringing from Washington. A senior agent pulled a blurred photo from his jacket, an image of a passenger seat from QX721 recovered, floating off the coast. DNA analysis had linked the blood on it to Eva, but her body was never found. The conclusion of death had been based only on assumption. A cold current ran through the spine of everyone present. Could it be the children never died? Meredith clenched her jaw. Re-examine all QX721 victim records. Create a list of those with no recovered bodies. Reanalyze their DNA profiles. We were too quick to declare them dead. Another technician uncovered a short voice log from the device's auxiliary memory. This time, it wasn't a child. It was a man's voice, shaken and anxious. Sublevel -2 is overloaded. If they find out I took the box, I won't survive. But the kids, they're still alive. Eva, she's the last hope. The recording ended with the sound of a heavy door opening and frantic footsteps. Then silence. Someone asked, "Who is that voice?" Another replied, "We're processing it. But there's a chance. It's Mason." Meredith turned sharply, her voice ice cold. He is not innocent, but he might be the only reason these children still have a chance. Everyone understood this was no longer just about a suitcase or a mysterious pilot. This was about exposing a system built to bury truth and life itself under the label of aviation disaster. Eva had become a symbol, but the truth went far beyond her. Dozens of children, dozens of lives, still waiting to be named. Once Eva's identity was confirmed, the media exploded. Law enforcement had to immediately reinforce security around the investigation site, where the suitcase and black box were now guarded under maximum clearance. Questions flooded in from every direction. Why was a commercial airline pilot in possession of such an object? And why was the government remaining silent about a device that could not be identified? That same night, the Pentagon issued a rare public statement. The black box in question did not belong to any registered civilian airline and had never been entered into any international flight database. Officially, it did not exist. Which meant if it contained a recording of Eva's voice, then the entire case file for Flight QX721 would have to be reopened. An engineer from DARPA, speaking anonymously, made a shocking claim. This is not a conventional black box. It's an encrypted internal data vault built under the Vortex protocol. That technology has only been used for top-secret missions since 2020. The statement hit like a second bomb. Because if true Mason's possession of the device constituted a federal-level breach of national secrecy and should have resulted in his immediate arrest upon discovery. But what gave the agents pause was a single question: who gave it to him? The device could not be stolen. Each unit was DNA locked to a single authorized user. It had to be issued from the inside. A new theory began to take shape. Mason did not act alone. The Central Intelligence Agency officially launched its own inquiry. Preliminary analysis revealed that several frequencies embedded within the black box matched archived signals previously captured by military satellites. That meant the black box didn't just record, it transmitted. It was a beacon. Inside the FBI, a special task unit was formed to dig through every detail of Mason's past, every mission, every flight, every travel log. Then, deep within a decrypted file, a line appeared: Operative Clearance Level Alpha, Protocol Echo Non-Disclosure Active. Meredith read the code line, her expression darkening. Mason was never just a commercial pilot. She took a breath. He was a courier, a classified operative, and that suitcase was never holding his secret. It carried the secrets of those who used him as a shadow. By now, the public was divided. One side condemned Mason as a traitor illegally transporting top-secret data. The other hailed him as a hero, someone willing to risk everything to expose a truth that had been buried beneath years of deception. As night fell at a secured wing of the airport where Mason had been held, Bolt the K9 unit still lay silently beside the suitcase, never taking his eyes off it. There was no longer hostility in his eyes, only instinct. He was still guarding the truth. 4:17 in the morning. Federal High Security Detention Center, Arizona. Security cameras flickered, then went completely dark for 47 seconds. At the same moment, the door to cell 7A swung open, no signs of forced entry. No alarm. Mason was gone. No one understood how it was possible. He had been under 24-hour surveillance in a facility with biometric access controls and constant rotation guards. But somehow, he vanished as if he had never been there. Just hours earlier, the recordings from the black box had been rocking the nation. News anchors were shouting. Congress demanded emergency hearings. The FBI raised the case classification to ultra-confidential. And now, the only man who knew where the box came from had disappeared without a trace. A level red manhunt was launched across all states within 30 minutes. The FBI locked down major highways, and civilian flights were restricted within a 300-mile radius. But what no one expected was this Mason was not running away. He was going back. Back to the place where he had been embedded from the beginning. Meredith immediately assembled a rapid response unit, and the first team member she summoned was not an agent. It was Bolt, the K9 who had first detected the biological signature inside the suitcase, was brought to the escape site. He was given the scent blood on Mason's sleeve, still preserved from the initial bite. Bolt didn't hesitate. He lunged forward. The tactical convoy followed right behind him. Their armored vehicle rolled out through the wet darkness, headlights slicing through the mist. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still slick with memory. Bolt's silhouette raced along the asphalt like a silent streak of lightning. Meredith gripped the radio, her voice sharp as a blade. Mason is carrying more than secrets. If we do not catch him in time, the truth will be buried again. Bolt led them through a wooded area, past abandoned industrial complexes, into the outer perimeter of a long-abandoned military zone. Ahead was a line of rusted warehouses. Dead silence, but Bolt stopped. He stood in front of one door, growling. Then a low bark. Meredith gave the order, surround the perimeter. Prepare for breach. Be ready for anything. The steel door creaked open, and what they found inside took their breath away. Behind the rusted iron door, they did not find Mason, but a narrow passage lined with industrial plastic descending into a cold, dimly lit basement. The air was thick with chlorine disinfectants and the metallic sting of corrosion. Flashlights barely pierced through the dense film of dust. Mold lined the damp concrete walls. The corridor led to sealed rooms, fitted with bulletproof glass, like a high-security biological containment facility. Some chambers were still active. It felt as though they had just breached a covert medical lab, not shut down, only forgotten. Meredith and Camilla split off from the team to sweep the area. They discovered a large chamber containing 12 thick glass pods, each one housing a child. Some were conscious, but their eyes were empty. Others lay motionless, hooked up to breathing tubes, their skin pale with oxygen deprivation. Some bore old injection marks. Others had been fitted with high-grade biometric monitors. On each child's wrist, a biological chip band. Camilla scanned them. All of them carry unique genetic markers. She whispered, her voice cracking. This place is not just for containment, it's for harvesting. At the far end of the room, the tech team found bags of pale yellow fluid marked with the code CX13, along with dozens of blood samples. A handwritten log was clipped nearby, signed MK Mason Kirk. In a corner, a medical directive was scrawled across a treatment board: adjust dosage every 72 hours. Monitor emotional response via biochart. Behind a small concealed panel, they found a secondary data room containing backup recordings, video files, and anatomical schematics of child subjects. All documents were encrypted with military-level clearance. The title on the folders, Project Serene, Phase 3. They're replicating emotions, then erasing them. Camilla murmured, her hands trembling. Meredith said nothing, but her eyes blazed with fury, grief, and resolve. A control panel blinked in the corner of the room. On the screen, a countdown. Batch 3, processing. EO 3 hours, 58 minutes. Below it, a list of coded names: EVA 721, Kira 311, Dex. Suddenly, a distorted voice echoed through the overhead speakers. Prepare batch 3 for processing. Move samples before 0400. Warning lights began flashing. A mechanical pulse echoed through the chamber. One of the girls in a pod stirred eyes, fluttering open lips, trembling. Is anyone there? Bolt stepped silently to her pod. He did not bark. He did not growl. He simply lay beside the glass, his eyes steady, protective. A silent vow. Meredith snapped into motion. Evacuate, now. Get every child out of here. The emergency alarm screamed. The entrance door began to close on its own. Someone or something was returning. And this time, they might not let anyone leave alive. The sirens wailed as the team raced to release the children. But just as the final group prepared to pull back, heavy footsteps echoed from the north corridor. Meredith raised a hand. Flashlights lit up moss-covered walls, casting shadows of advancing figures. Mercenaries. At least 8 of them, fully armed, no insignias. But their movements were military precise. They approached like executioners. One shouted in Spanish, "No one leaves. They're all test subjects." Gunfire erupted, shredding the silence. Meredith's team responded instantly, forming a fan-like formation to shield the children while firing back. Camilla grabbed a young girl and ran for a side hallway, only to find a mercenary blocking the path weapon raised directly at the child. But from the darkness, Bolt launched like a missile. The impact was brutal. Bolt sank his jaws into the attacker's arm, dragging him to the ground. Camilla shielded the girl, heart pounding with fear and awe. Bolt refused to let go, his eyes glowing with a primal fire, as if he knew the child's life depended on him. Another shot rang out. Meredith dropped 2 attackers with perfect precision to the shoulder and thigh. We are out of time. Seal their exit. Bolt kept fighting until Camilla reached them, wrenching the gun from the mercenary's grip and slamming the stock into the back of his skull. He collapsed, unconscious. The little girl clung to Camilla, shaking, but for the first time, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. The alarms blared louder. Red lights spun like beacons, warning of a second wave. Meredith shouted, "Clear the east exit. Get those kids out no matter what." Bolt limped back to the group, blood on one foreleg, but still alert, still guarding. He licked the girl's hand. She reached out trembling and hugged him, then broke into sobs. Meredith led the team through the final hallway toward the emergency exit that had just been unlocked. The pounding of boots behind them confirmed the mercenaries were closing in. Camilla turned, returning fire, only 3 bullets left. Just before the steel door sealed shut, Meredith tossed in a flashbang. A blinding white burst cut off pursuit. The team escaped. Above them, floodlights from the landing zone blazed through the night sky. Each child was placed on a stretcher, vitals checked. A young medic grabbed Meredith's hand, nodded. "They're alive, thanks to you and that dog." Bolt sat quietly beside the little girl. No barking, no movement, just presence. He had chosen his place not as a weapon, but as a guardian. As Bolt approached the final pod, his posture shifted. No growling, no alert, just recognition. He whimpered softly, lowering his head to the glass, as if calling to a memory long buried. Meredith froze, heart pounding. She knelt, shining her light into the pod. Inside was a small girl, slender frame, long black hair tied loosely to one side. Her skin was pale lips, tinted blue from hypothermia and exhaustion. Her eyes cracked open, blank, but not empty. Something inside her was still alive. Camilla held up a biometric scanner. The screen flickered, then displayed a line that made them both stop breathing. DNA match 98.7%. Subject Mason Kirk. "No way," Meredith whispered. In that moment, all the disconnected fragments locked together. The suitcase Mason had clutched, his pleading eyes at the time of arrest, his stubborn silence, the girl's voice in the black box. It all made sense. Camilla scrolled through the scanner data. Subject ID, EVA 1. Emotional status, non-reactive. Note, increase CX13 dosage. Monitor for spontaneous memory erasure. Meredith felt like someone had punched her in the chest. This girl, this fragile child, was the reason Mason had risked everything. Escaped detention, rewired the broadcast system, triggered an entire operation. Not for rebellion, but for fatherhood. In a corner, they found an encrypted video log. Timestamp 3 weeks ago. In it, Mason held the girl, his body bruised and battered. He whispered, "I will come back. You have to survive. I promise." His eyes were not those of an agent. They were a father's. The girl opened her eyes, slowly, painfully. When she saw Bolt, her lips trembled. "Bolt, you came again." Meredith was speechless. That line, it was not lab programming. It was memory. A real one. Living proof that emotion remained, that love still existed inside these children. Camilla gripped Meredith's hand. "We have to get her out, and we have to find Mason, now." 3 o'clock in the morning. Inside a cold interrogation room, Mason Kirk sat still, his wrists cuffed, his eyes locked on the one-way mirror. He had not spoken since his recapture. No lawyer requested, no resistance. The pale ceiling light cast shadows on his hollow face. A dry smear of blood still marked his temple. Camilla entered, first placing a glass of water in front of him. He did not touch it. Meredith followed, then placed a photo on the table. Eva, resting under medical care. Mason looked up. His eyes were red, but no tears fell. She's alive." Meredith nodded. "Because of you. But now you need to tell us the truth, all of it." No threats, no pressure. Mason began, his voice low, occasionally cracking. 7 years ago, I was a tactical commander under a joint NATO defense science program. We had one mission to control emotion for combat efficiency. Meredith and Camilla exchanged a glance. He continued. It started with adult volunteers, but the memory wipe caused mass suicides. So they switched to children, undeveloped emotion profiles easier to reprogram. That's how they phrased it. He paused, his hands clenched into fists. I opposed it. I resigned. But by the time I returned to civilian life, it was too late. 1 year later, Eva, my daughter, went missing. He swallowed. I received a video. No words, just a girl in quarantine. Her eyes. I knew them. I wasn't sure, but a father knows. For the last 3 years, I tracked every military-linked disappearance. Every time it was the same ghost signals, hijacked comms, and internal operator. I knew they hadn't stopped. Camilla asked, "And that's why you came back?" Mason nodded. I rejoined the civilian flight circuit, but my goal was the sealed maintenance wing. I knew an old broadcast station was hidden there. I reinstalled the encryption unit, sent warning signals. But I needed time to encode Eva's voice into the black box. And I needed that suitcase to get noticed without being confiscated. Meredith whispered, "So you let Bolt bite you?" Mason smiled faintly. "Bolt's an old friend. I trained him. I smeared synthetic blood on the handle embedded with Eva's DNA. I trusted Bolt would respond." The room felt like it had stopped breathing. There was no defiance in his words, no guilt, only the pain of a man who had sacrificed reputation, freedom, and future to prove one thing: his daughter was alive. Camilla asked gently, "You know this could get you charged with treason, right?" Mason nodded. "I didn't do it to survive. I did it for her." He pointed at the photo of Eva. Camilla reopened the internal communications log, cross-referencing it with the unusual signals Mason had transmitted in the 2 weeks before the incident. She could hardly believe it. Mason had sent 8 different short encrypted transmissions using a rare frequency band. According to defense protocols, those signals were classified as special unit emergency frequency. We were trained to recognize it. Meredith exhaled, staring at the screen. And we missed it. In the second interrogation session, Mason was allowed to remove his cuffs. He spoke not with the tone of someone defending himself, but like a man who had shed his final layer of armor. 1 week before I was caught, I broke into the old maintenance wing. I installed a decoy signal transmitter to draw attention. It was like throwing a stone into still water, just enough to stir the surface. But I never imagined the system I once trained would mistake me for the threat. Mason explained that because he could not go public, he was forced to simulate a low-level threat. The airport incident had not been an accident. I knew Bolt would not attack unless he smelled Eva's blood on the suitcase. And I knew security staff would record everything. "You gambled your life?" Camilla asked. Mason nodded. "I gambled my future. But not for me." He emphasized that every move he made, including approaching the sealed gate and triggering the signal, served only one purpose: to make someone notice. If the system failed to respond, he would disappear, just like so many others. But if someone responded, there would be a chance, and Bolt had been the key. Meredith turned to him, and the suitcase. That was Eva's cry for help. It was evidence, a black box in case I never got the chance to speak. Silence settled in the room. The numbers, the data, the codes, now just fragments under the weight of one brutal truth: a father who had done everything simply to make the world hear his daughter's faint voice. Mason leaned back. For a brief moment, he was no longer a suspect. He was simply a father, exhausted, alone, and driven by the deepest instinct to protect. Meredith whispered, "You have nothing left to lose." Mason looked up, calm. "There is one thing I still need to do." As Meredith stood to leave the interrogation room, her hand reached for the door handle. Then Mason's voice came from behind. "Wait. I have a request." Camilla turned. "What is it?" He swallowed hard, his voice slightly trembling. "I want to write a letter to Eva. A real letter, not a report, not a deposition. Just a father's last message to his daughter." The two agents exchanged a glance. Meredith said nothing. She quietly placed a blank sheet of paper and a fountain pen on the table. Then they walked out, leaving Mason alone beneath the dim yellow light. His hand trembled as he picked up the pen. His fingers still bore the cuts from the chase, but the first line appeared slow shaking and heartbreakingly sincere. My dearest Ava. By the time you read this, I may no longer be here, but I need you to know this: from the moment I learned you were alive, I stopped being a soldier. I became only a father, and a father will break the rules, face prison, do anything, just so his child can truly live as a child. I will never forgive myself for not protecting you sooner. But if you have ever felt alone, ever thought no one heard your cries, now you know someone always did. I heard you in every recording. I felt your pain, your fear, and your incredible courage. Do not let them erase your memories, Ava. Do not let them silence the voice inside you. You do not have to be strong like a soldier. You just have to live bravely like a child. And if anyone ever asks why your father did all this, you can answer, because he never gave up hope. And he believed that even a heart trapped inside a frozen lab could still reach the world. With every piece of my heart, Dad. The pen slipped from Mason's fingers. He lowered his head onto the paper. At that moment, the man once labeled a cold-blooded commander, a traitor, a terrorist, was none of those things. He was simply a father exposed, broken but loving his daughter more than life itself. When Meredith returned, she said nothing. She just folded the letter, slid it into an envelope, and gave a silent nod. We'll make sure she gets it. 1 week after the rescue, a private ceremony was held inside a military base. No media, no cameras, only a few authorized individuals, and a silent dog sitting among the seats of honor. Bolt the K9, once deemed disobedient at the airport, was now awarded a national honor for extraordinary response, saving dozens of children and preventing a potential disaster. Bolt did not know he had become a symbol. He simply wagged his tail when he saw Eva standing beside a plainclothes female officer, now her adoptive mother. The most iconic photo from the ceremony showed a dark-haired girl hugging Bolt's neck, both of them bathed in soft light filtering through the ceiling glass. No caption was released to the public. Every detail of the incident, including the truth about the illegal research facility and the real identity of Mason Kirk, had been classified at the highest level. Mason, now in a state of complete exhaustion, was detained. A special military tribunal charged him with unlawful entry, tampering with communications, and leaking classified data. But during the closed hearing, most witnesses testified that without Mason, the children would never have been found. The final ruling: he would be held in a recovery facility for former agents. No death sentence, no public trial, no name. In government records, he had died in service in 2021. They say some heroes are honored with medals, others with silence. But to those who saw the truth firsthand, they knew Mason was not the villain, and Bolt was the last surviving instinct of loyalty in a world falling apart. Over 2 months later, Eva was officially placed under the care of the same female officer from the Special Task Force. Her identity was changed for protection, and all medical records were sealed by executive order. From then on, within the civilian system, Eva 721 no longer existed. She was now Lena, a little girl with dark hair, a fondness for teddy bears, and a loyal friend named Bolt. Their new home sat on a hillside in the suburbs. No helicopters, no alarms, only birdsong and golden morning light on the porch. From the first day, Bolt never left Lena's side. When she practiced walking again, he moved slowly beside her. When she woke in the night from a nightmare, he rested his head on the bed until her hand touched his ear and she fell asleep again. A small classroom was set up in the house, its walls covered in scribbled drawings, one of Bolt flying a plane, another of a man in uniform holding a little girl under a rainbow. One drawing was never touched by anyone but Lena, a giant heart with the words, "Inside Daddy. I'm okay now." Bolt never strayed more than 5 meters from Lena. Doctors called it post-mission attachment, but Meredith knew better. It was instinct, redemption, a quiet promise between Bolt and Mason. If Mason could not be by his daughter's side, then Bolt would stand guard in his place. Lena slowly adjusted. She laughed more, learned to ride a bike, held her new mother's hand at the store without trembling. Once, when asked what she wanted for her upcoming birthday, she said, "I wish Bolt could be a police dog, so he could catch all the bad people who hurt my friends." In one corner of the living room was a small table. On it sat a single framed photo, Bolt lying beside a sleeping Lena, the blanket pulled up to her chest, a warm lamp casting a soft glow on her peaceful face. No caption, no medals, just peace. Her adoptive mother once told Meredith, "I don't know if I'm doing this motherhood thing right, but I know." She doesn't look scared anymore. And for me, that's enough. Outside the window, Bolt curled under the sunlight while Lena sat nearby with a new box of crayons. She drew a small house, a big sun, and 2 people holding hands. In that picture, no one had a name, but everyone knew exactly who they were. One late autumn afternoon, with the wind turning crisp, Lena sat on the porch, leaning against Bolt's back. In her lap was a book titled Silent Heroes. She asked her mom, "Do you think Bolt understands when I say, 'Thank you'?" Her mother smiled. "He does, and he's saying, 'You're welcome' in his own way." From afar, a flock of birds soared across the glowing red sky. Lena closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I'm not afraid anymore. Thanks to Bolt, and thanks to Dad." The night before the first day of school, Lena, once known as EVA 721, sat at the edge of her bed, holding Bolt close. The moonlight filtered through the window, casting a soft silver glow across the wall covered in drawings. She gently stroked Bolt's ears, then turned to her adoptive mother sitting nearby and whispered, "Mom, was my dad a bad person?" A question so simple, yet it left the mother in silence. After a long moment, she leaned down, looked straight into her daughter's eyes, and replied, "Your dad crossed the whole world. He defied rules, the military, and danger itself, just to keep one promise that no one would ever hurt you again. If that makes him a bad person, then maybe this world needs more people like that." Bolt lifted his head and let out a soft whine as if agreeing. Lena smiled, rested her cheek on his warm fur, and drifted into sleep. It was a peaceful night. Not every hero gets named. Not every story makes the evening news. And not every pain gets recognized in official records. But for a little girl who was once kept as a test subject, the greatest victory was not the exposure of the truth. It was learning to hold someone's hand, to smile, and to dream of a birthday with cake, candles, and wishes. We have just journeyed through a long story, starting from a single bark at an airport to the secret inside a suitcase, and finally to a hidden network of shadows and experiments that sought to manipulate human emotion. But among all those dark turns, what made this story truly special was choice. A father chose to sacrifice his honor to protect his child. A dog chose to disobey orders to save lives. A little girl chose to keep living even after being trained to feel nothing. And a special ops team chose to trust instinct over a closed system. Maybe you shed a tear for Mason, for Bolt, for Eva, or maybe you just sat in silence. But if you are still watching now, I believe one thing. You are feeling something real about justice, about life, and about doing what is right. Think about this. In a world where every emotion can be programmed, could loyalty, love, and the instinct to protect be the last things that truly make us human? You may forget Mason's name. You might not recall every detail, But if you remember just one thing, please let it be this question. Have we done enough to protect our children? Because truth is not always clear, but love always finds its way home. And if you are still here, then maybe you are like me, unable to turn away from stories that are not finished yet. Let's keep going together, because in the stories to come, a glance, a small action could change the life of someone you never expected. See you in the next video.